Welcome to Surviving the Dream with your hosts, Casey Arnold
and David Conley.
We're here to talk to people who seem to have their dream job and find out, what did it take? Is it what they imagined? Is it worth it? How do they do it?
Join us as we uncover the secrets of surviving the dream.
Hi, Dave. How you doing this week?
I'm very good, Casey, and I'm very excited today because our guest is something that I am very passionate about, and I know that you are too. Drinking. Alcohol. There you go. You got it in one. We've got somebody who survives a dream, and I want to know how he does that, doing what he does, because he's a winemaker. And not just any winemaker. He's a very fine winemaker. I actually, I just because of I knew he was coming on, I thought I'd have a taste of his wine at home the other day with a friend and my wife. And we finished a bottle and had a second one. It was that good.
Nice.
Yeah, it was that good. Steve Clifton is with us here. Hello, Steve.
Hello. How are you both?
Oh, we're good. I'm very excited. Steve, you've got to tell me, what is the journey to become a winemaker? I mean, that is that your dream job?
Yeah, absolutely it is. And that's an interesting question because I think there's several different paths that you can go down in order to achieve the goal, if you will. I think that the most common path is that you're born into a family that's been in the industry for maybe generations and even maybe centuries in Europe. And that is definitely not my case. My parents were strict Southern Baptists. There was never any alcohol in our house. And so,
Way to rebel.
That's an interesting sort of transition. And I think that the other thing is that you go to school for it, that you knew that you wanted to be in agriculture, and you knew that that growing grapes was maybe your passion, and you went to UC Davis or maybe Cal State Fullerton, and you got your degree in growing grapes and in enology, and that was not my path. I went to USC. I was a communications and drama double major.
There we go.
Yeah.
That's the way. I knew that my degree wasn't wasted. Thanks, Steve.
Well, my ex-wife says that I communicate very dramatically, so maybe I got something out of it along the way.
And she drove you to drink, so there you go.
Yeah. Well, that's always been an easy sort of grasp, with the occupation that I've chosen. So
Smoothed everything out. So what is the process for making wine? Like when you're when you're studying these things at one of those courses, you did not take that, or how did you learn to make wine?
Well, so I have taken courses. What's interesting is my life changed in a really dramatic way back in 1988. My sister had moved to Milan. She had married a gentleman from Milan, and she moved there and didn't speak Italian at the time, and she was frustrated with the fact that everybody spoke Italian, and she thought that they were all talking about her, and she was right, they were, but it was frustrating for her, and
are you saying that she learned the language and then found out that they were talking about
yeah.
that? Oh, how awful.
The real language is wine, though. That's the universal language.
Well, and that's what I found out. What happened was my first career was in playing music. And so I was playing music all through Southern California, and it was my first love. And I came from a surf community down in San Clemente, California, and we were part of the whole community of just this burgeoning surf culture that was happening. And so my band would play at all the different surf competitions were just starting to happen, and we were the go-to band, that played at all the award parties and what have you. And so I know this is sort of a tangent, but let's just go there.
No, it's the path to the dream.
Yeah, exactly. And so that's what I was doing from the time that I was maybe 18 until I was 26, 27. And so I had this month off in January of 1988. My sister had moved to Italy, and I thought that I was doing this, maybe altruistic thing, going there to help her, while she was struggling with, acclimation. But it changed my life completely. I mean, I went and spent a month, the month of January in 1988. I'd never traveled abroad. Everything about my life changed with that trip completely. And it's I can't minimize the effect of that trip, because I saw a different perspective. I saw a different sort of view on life. And one of the most interesting things was Carlo, Treva's husband. He had a large family, and we'd go out to dinner in a different town, and we'd kind of travel over the course of northern Italy doing this. But we'd go to different restaurants, and I remember tasting new things, and I remember tasting wines and all that, and all that was fun. But really, what struck me was that everybody had kind of a different viewpoint. Everybody had like a different sort of take on life. There was Uncle Guido, who's a fascist, and there's Uncle Stefano, who's super left. There's everybody on the spectrum. Italy's had 17 different parties. We have 2, but they've had 17, and they've all had some sort of governance over the country since World War II. And what struck me most of all was that we would talk and we'd debate, and everything was in Italian, so I was kind of back, but I would watch everybody's hands move and their voices raise and what have you. And if that happened here in America, especially right now, then we wouldn't talk to those people again for for at least a while, if not the rest of our lives. But we would then go do that again the next night, and we do it again the next night and the next night. And what it ingrained in me is that there's this ceremony at the table, and it's the last ceremony that humans really have together, and it's dining, and it's being at the table. And what I realized was that wine, the food was interesting and it was always different, but wine started the conversation. Wine is what made the memories, within that trip for me. It was remembering like what we had that night and what the conversation was, and it was attached to everything. And it really, it changed my whole perspective on life in general. And I can't emphasize it enough. I came home, and when you're playing music professionally, it's interesting because there's hills and valleys, and there's highs and lows, and we were really fortunate because eventually, because of all those surf contests we played at, we were picked up by this brand new thing that was on cable TV. And this guy came up and said, "Hey, I've got I'm doing the soundtrack work for this new thing on cable TV. It's all sports. It's called ESPN." And so that dates the whole thing. So our contact with ESPN actually made it lucrative. We actually, it allowed us to have a broader audience and to make some money out of it. We weren't just a garage band anymore. So that was really fun. But the thing is, when you're playing music, because of those highs and lows and all that, it means you work in a lot of restaurants, because you've got to support your music habit over the years. And so I worked in restaurants, and I quickly realized that wine was my way of raising my tip averages. When I came back from this trip to Italy, I only wanted to work in Italian restaurants, and I just focused on Italian wine. And I started studying Italian wine, and I started reading about it. And literally for maybe 4 years, I never picked up anything that wasn't a textbook or a magazine that was dealing with wine in general, but I was focusing on Italian wine. And I was selling it in restaurants, and then eventually buying it for restaurants down in Orange County.
And now you're making wine.
Well, so that transition was really interesting, because I got so focused on it, and but I was living here in California, and I didn't have a lot of other opportunities to go abroad and what have you then. So I determined, actually, I had a girlfriend, and she asked me one day, what are you going to do with your life? Because, music was kind of like waning. And she was like, if you're going to do this for the rest of your life, I don't know. Like, I don't know if I'm in. And I said, actually, I've decided I'm going to make wine for a living. And she said, you can't. You either have to be born into a family, or you have to um, you have to study that in school. Going back to my original, sort of thought. But as soon as somebody says that it's impossible, that I can't do it, then now I have to do it. Now you've thrown the gauntlet, and I've got to like figure this out. And I had friends in Calistoga, up in Napa, and I had friends in Santa Barbara. And when I really examined Calistoga and Napa and Sonoma, that whole area, it was just so set. It had already been like kind of figured out. It had already been, it was so much more, just owned, if you will. And Santa Barbara was this burgeoning, just little blossom post-prohibition that started in, the late 60s and 70s. I moved up in 91, and there were 24 wineries when I moved up here. And there's just over 400 now.
Whoa.
Yeah. So, over the course of the 30 years that I've been involved in the wine production, here in Santa Barbara, you can see how it's grown exponentially.
And that's you brought up something quite interesting. That I've been to the two areas that you're talking about, Napa, and I've been to obviously Santa Barbara area. And Napa, I find a little bit off-putting personally. I'm feeling like, I'm not qualified to drink here. Whereas I feel that Santa Barbara is a bit more like, hey, do you like wine? Just have a drink. And is the attitude? Do you find that attitude as a winemaker? Is that what you're going to?
And having been a wine buyer and a wine enthusiast before I was a wine producer, I've literally, when I made that decision to start here in Santa Barbara County, I also made the decision that I would be dedicated to eliminating as much of the intimidation that goes into wine as I possibly could.
I love that. I absolutely love that, because I think I'm one of those people who was intimidated by wine and would then just go down to the local shop and go, right, I'll have that one because it's $10. Except in England, it would be £5. But I mean, it's I think it's just changed my view of wine by meeting people like you and the wineries in Santa Barbara region, where I feel like they're welcoming, and there's no, for want of a better word, there's not the snobbery that I found in other parts of the world.
No, and it doesn't mean that you're not making world-class wines and that you're not pushing things to be, the best that they can possibly be. But when it comes down to it, it's a beverage, and you really want as many people to experience it as possible. And, a lot of people don't want to order wine because they don't want to mispronounce something. They don't want to buy the wrong wine. They usually just, I remember, selling wine in restaurants, and people would just go over to the right side and they would go to the bottom and they would buy the most expensive thing, if they could. And that's no way to pair with what you're eating. It's no way to have an experience that really heightens and makes your dining experience the best that it can be. And right. Like I said before, dining is really the last of our communal celebrations, or like the last of our ceremonies that we really all participate in.
Can you just? I know Casey's dying to get in there, but I just got to ask.
I'm just going to silently listen on this.
She's just too excited about the wine. How you've just brought up something, and I've always wondered this. How would you advise people to pick a wine in a restaurant?
My first advice, and this is difficult, is to pick a restaurant that hires people that are congenial and welcoming. I think that, I think that everything trickles down from the top, like owners or, the chefs of restaurants need to have people that are trying to share, and then the most important thing when you're sitting at a table is to use the resources that are there. You should be able to talk to a sommelier or a server and say, I like wines that are like this,
Mm-hmm.
and these are the type of wines that I like, and let them kind of steer you because they know their list really well, and they should, or at least they should,
Right.
And so the best way to order a bottle of wine is to first figure out what food's going to be at the table. And maybe you have 4 people, maybe you have 6 people, and it could be as diverse as fish and short ribs, and you've got to figure out something that's going to work for everyone,
Mm-hmm.
or you've got to figure out a couple of bottles that are going to work for everyone, and let that kind of steer the night. But once you know what you're going to order, then you can tell somebody, really what type of wines you gravitate towards, and then let them steer you. I think the most important thing to remember when you're having a dining experience is that this is definitely not going to be the last one that you have.
Yeah.
It's going to happen again tomorrow and the next
Famous
day and the
last
next day.
word.
And so, it doesn't have to be the be all end all. It's just learn and be open and,
Right.
let it. And there's contrast wine pairing and there's comparison wine pairing. And you have to be open to both.
And don't let the price dictate. It seems to be a
No, 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 no,
takeaway.
no. Many times the best wine for your meal and what's going to go best with the food that's ordered at the table is not the most expensive wine. And the most expensive wine may not go with anything that's been, ordered at the table. You can order the best bottle of Bordeaux, and if you've got 4 people eating fish, that's just going to suck.
Right.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Go
So
on, Casey.
what inspires you to create the different types of wines that you make? It sounds like everything you do is like community based. Is that factored in, or how do you do it?
I think there's a couple of different sort of directions I'm going to take that question. And first of all, like I love the benchmarks. I love knowing about the wines of Bordeaux, the wines of Burgundy, the wines of the Loire. I love knowing about Piemonte. I love knowing about Tuscany. I love, like all the things that have become the benchmarks over centuries. I love that. And then I love, I've had the opportunity to make wine in Italy. I've had the opportunity to make wine in Argentina and also in Washington State. And I always thought I was going to learn a lot more about those places, but what I really learned is that I make wine in the best place possible in Santa Barbara County. I feel really blessed that I get to make wine here. We don't have hail, we don't have freezes, we don't have, all these different maladies that tend to happen in other places. That being said, I've created a theory, as far as making wine. I don't want to make emulations of those benchmarks that I love so much. I want to make translations, and anybody that studies language, you quickly realize that you can't make direct translations. You have to allow for idiomatic expressions and what have you, right? And those idiomatic expressions within wine are soil, rainfall, like topography, and then also the people that are involved. And so you have to take all those things into consideration and try to make the best translation you can, not try to copy something that comes from somewhere else.
So it sounds like you really are like vine to glass hands on. Like what are the steps in the process of I'm gonna be a winemaker. I'm gonna create this thing that I enjoy so much.
Yeah, yeah. For me, I started making wine with and then for other people. So I worked my way up the ranks to assistant winemaker, and then got my first winemaking job. I started out at Rancho Sisquoc Winery, and I worked from literally just a tasting room cellar person to assistant winemaker. And then I got my first winemaking job at Vega Vineyards in Los Olivos, and then made wine for Brander and Domaine Santa Barbara. And in 1995, I started my own thing called Palmina, and Palmina was exclusively Italian varietals. And then in 1996, I started Brewer Clifton with my partner Greg Brewer, and that was exclusively Chardonnay and Pinot Noir. But we were buying grapes that were available, and then it quickly sort of shifted to I had I started looking at what was happening within Santa Barbara County, and a lot of people were moving here, and they were driven to plant grapes on their property. Sometimes what I would call landscape grapes, like they wanted grapes around their house, and so it's kind of a dabbling sort of effect. And what you quickly figure out is maybe somebody told you if you plant some grapes here, it'll help you pay for your mortgage and all that. Grape growing is not it's not a great way to make a lot of money. It's not a great way to make any money, as a matter of fact. It's
Try comedy.
Yeah, there you go. But you might have 3 really great years and great yields, and then you might have 7 drought years that aren't so great. And so when it all averages out, you've broken even pretty much. And so I started looking at that, and I started thinking, rather than me buy grapes, I might be able to lease these different pieces of property and farm them myself, because the only way to make money off grapes is to make wine. And so I for both Palmina and for Brewer Clifton, started leasing property, and I started bringing grape clones over from Italy that had never been planted in California, and changing the landscape of it, and making something that was a little bit more exclusive. But that's the first step, right?
Okay.
And
All I'm picturing is like Lucille Ball in her big vat of grapes, stomping it down. I'm assuming it's not really like that. How do you really do it?
It's super like that. And that's one of the funnest parts. And no, we did have some time, especially at Brewer Clifton, where we would have interns, and there was a grape stomp, a true grape stomp, because we would do everything whole cluster, and so there's no other way to get the juice started than to throw somebody in the vat and have them stomp away.
I'm in.
So
So you still do that? You still do the old-fashioned take your shoes off, get in there?
Yeah, I have a total protocol for like hygiene and the whole bit. But the great thing about wine is that the alcohol starts self-cleaning immediately. So
you don't want someone in your saying, "Oh, I can a note of athlete's foot in that one."
No, that's not a varietal anyone is missing. Good way to get your steps in. Have you ever tested?
That's great. Get everybody on a Fitbit, get them in there, and it's like 25,000 steps. And
how many steps does it take to make a bottle of wine?
Yeah, and then you can deserve to drink.
Are you drinking wine right now while we do this? Sorry, Dave.
I have. It's part of my job.
I love it.
I love it. It's his job. He has to. He cannot have breakfast without having wine.
Exactly.
So does that mean you still love it? Like you love it as much as that trip to Italy? Wine still excites you?
Absolutely. Yeah. And, I've had highs and lows with that too. I've had hills and valleys. I think at one point I had 15 different clients that I was making wine for. And so what it means is that you're having more meetings than you are like actually having your hands on the product, and that got to be really just overwhelming and discouraging. And so now I'm happy to say, I've had a lot of great projects. I've had Palmina, I've had Brewer Clifton, I've had Tritono down in Argentina. I've had, I've helped my friend Joe Bastianich start his winery up in Friuli in northern Italy, and anyway, I've had some really fun projects. But now I'm part of a project called Vega Vineyard and Farm in Buellton, California, and it's the most exciting thing I've ever done. And honestly, it's reigniting, it's rejuvenating. I'm more excited about wine than I have been ever.
That's amazing. So what is it about it that's so like unique and exciting?
So, let's go back to my trip to Italy in '88, and really what I saw is that wine was at home on the table with really interesting food. And so my goal has always been to make wines that they're not. I've never wanted to make wines that are drank wine against wine against wine against wine, in some competitive manner. Although I've been able to achieve some really great scores with journalists and all that. That's never been the goal. My goal has always been to make wines that are really at home at the table with great food. And so with Palmina, I would try to cater parties for the winery and do all the cooking myself and what have you. But with Vega, it's an organic farm. It's a farm to table restaurant. It incorporates an organic vineyard. It incorporates animals that biodynamically, eat the cover crops and they help me fertilize. And so and the animals are available for everyone to come and feed and have fun and see and all that. It's an environment that's holistic, if you will, where you can go and have an experience for the day, both in the vineyard, at the restaurant, with the animals, at the farm, buy the produce. We have a farm stand and what have you. And so it's just all the different pieces of the puzzle firing on all cylinders,
and everything's feeding into each other, it sounds like. So the animals fertilizing the land and aerating the land. That's incredible.
That's exactly right. And we don't harvest any animals for the menu, but we do, we are making like goat's milk and goat's milk cheese and soaps with that goat's milk and that sort of thing.
But you're not making goat's hoof.
No.
Is that what you're telling me? Oh, that's good. That's good. Yeah.
Is that a thing people even eat?
We do. All the produce that comes out of our farm is on our menu. And so the menu changes more than seasonally. It's almost like bi-monthly by what's coming out of the ground.
And that's really amazing. It sounds like community is very steeped in everything you do, and that you keep amping up your dream as you go, right? From musician to winemaker to this, it sounds like the group experience is very important.
That's exactly. I always like to say that I've never really had a real job. I've had some real jobs along the way as a means to the jobs that I focus on. But at 18 years old, I started playing music for a living, and it was a fantastic, ride of just doing something that was completely alternative. Maybe I would paint some houses along the way and work in some restaurants, but music was my goal. And then when music ended, I went into the recording industry for a little bit, and that was the worst part of my life. And then I went into the nightclub industry, and that was a great thing, but those aren't real jobs. Those are still fun things that are passionate and all that. And going into wine was just it was just amazing. It was I got the same feeling that I had felt from recording music. I think of it in the same ways. I think about lows and mids and highs and kind of, doing an EQ on all that, and
Mhm.
blending those different facets together. And so that, I can directly correlate music and wine on an EQ. You know what I mean? Like I know how to like put those two things together. The other piece of the puzzle is, a lot of people talk about wine in sustainable ways, right? And it's always about the plant, and it's always about the vineyard. And it's always been a focus of mine that wine needs to be sustainable on a human front. And so the thing I'm most proud of over the course of my career is that, I started a farming company in 2005, and I still work with the same people that started. We've had two people really turn over in the 19 years of this farming company.
Wow.
And it's been because they decided to get married, and in essence move back to Mexico. And there's never been like a contentious firing, or like any sort of situation where somebody had to be let go. It's always just been. I want people. See, within my industry, within agriculture in general, there's a lot of people that hire people on for one process and then let them go, and then hire them on for the next process and then let them go. And so it's not sustainable. And people need to be able to pay mortgages, pay rent, to send their kids to school, all that. And so that's always been a major goal.
So there's even community in the culture of your winemaking. Is what you're
Absolutely.
saying.
Yeah. Yeah.
Interesting.
I think that's one of the the biggest parts about making really fine wine, in my opinion. There are the decisions that I make on a daily basis, and I can't make those decisions without having people like. I have people that are part of the process, from planting the grapes to, or grafting the grapes, to pruning or shoot thinning or leaf thinning. And once all that's done, then harvest comes in the fall. And harvest is super important, but then you have to get it to the bottle too. And the same people are involved all the way from, grape to glass. The people that planted the grapes, grafted the grapes, did all the different processes, are also the same people that bottle it. And there's a real proprietary sense when you have that kind of arc with a product, and they're all really proud of the wines. And so that allows me to make decisions differently than if I was bringing in people and training all the time.
So would you say that your relationships are also key to sustaining the dream?
Absolutely. Each one of those relationships are integral to me being able to be, in the situation that I'm in.
What do you do? I mean, you've had. I love that you've been talking about peaks and valleys. How do you get through the rough times? This is your dream. How do you get through that?
To be honest with you, the wine industry has been really, really good to me. My peaks and valleys kind of come more from personal situations than anything else. And maybe that stems from the fact that, for years I had to travel. I was in 28 different states and 5 different countries, and I had to travel to support all those markets. I'm really happy. The Vega Vineyard and Farm situation is a place where everything's direct to consumer, and so it eliminates a lot of that. But that travel, I used to travel, over probably about 160 days out of the year, and so that's a difficult thing for personal relationships and all that sort of thing. And also, the peaks and valleys come because everything that you do as much as we enjoy having a glass of wine at the end of the day, when everything revolves around alcohol, you have to be really, really cautious, and pace yourself.
Does that worry you? I often wonder about that, about winemakers, that you worry the amount that you are consuming.
Yeah, over the years, there have been situations where, I might be in New York for a 3-day stint, and I would see maybe 8 to 10 different accounts over the course of the day, and then do a dinner that night. And every single account expects you to taste alongside them, so that you're talking about the same thing. And so you have to figure out how to pace yourself and how to do it. You have to love your spit bucket.
Is that how you find balance? You try to enjoy to a certain point, or are there like things you do in your personal life to level it out?
Yeah, you've got to have, wine can't be your only hobby. You've got to have, like, I've always had bike riding, or, surfing, or, something that drives you to be clean and clear, you know what I mean? And active and that sort of thing. I love skiing. It's my favorite sport of all.
That's amazing. It's finding that balance. Do you have any concern at the moment about the marijuana market? I mean, I've heard some winemakers saying that that's now moving in on their territory.
Well, huge. And here in Santa Barbara County, our winds blow basically in one direction 95% of the time. They blow off to the Pacific from the west into our valleys. And so if you're on the eastern side of a large cannabis planting, especially when they're harvesting, it's one of the oiliest crops possible, oilier than eucalyptus. And if you're downwind of a eucalyptus tree, like, Martha's Vineyard in Napa Valley, if you're downwind of a eucalyptus tree, you're going to taste eucalyptus oil on the grapes. And if you're downwind of a cannabis operation, you're going to taste cannabis oil on the grapes. There's no two ways about it.
Would that be a good hybrid, or is that something that you would not want?
Well, Casey, you're going to have to tell me.
I never thought about that. I got to be honest.
I think that's purely subjective, isn't
it? Okay. I mean, sure. I'm sure there's a market for it. I can tell you that.
Oh, for sure. And there's definitely people that include, maybe a key in their barrel every once in a while. But
a cannabis Chablis, please.
Yeah.
Wonderful. All right. Well, we're moving towards questions now.
Okay.
So let's ask you some of the questions that we ask all our guests.
Great.
Yeah. I want to go first. Can I go first?
Go on.
I've been very quiet and patient. I'm losing it. I want to know, because you have been so fortunate to find like so much passion with, from one dream to the next, from music to this, like, is there any other job you would ever do? Is there like a third potential thing lurking, or like in another lifetime, I would have been a...
Yes. And I've thought about this for the last 30 years. My true connection to wine happened when I realized how connected it is to history. And I love history. And in another lifetime, or maybe at the end of this one, my ultimate goal would be to be a history teacher.
Interesting. I did not see that coming.
I didn't see that coming.
I love Western Civ. I love, I just love history in general. And the connection that I have with wine is because it's so connected to history.
You could pair the different civilizations with different wines that represent it.
It's so interesting to me because it encompasses, well, as far as Western civilization goes, it goes from the Middle East and the Romans and the Greeks, and bringing it into Greece and Italy, and then up into France and Spain and Germany. But then what's also interesting is how it's affected English history and also Dutch history, as far as shipping and all that,
Mm.
and consumerism, and how English history has affected the wines of Spain and, affected the wines of France and Bordeaux and Burgundy in general. And it's all so interconnected that it's fascinating to me.
I look
Yeah.
forward to dream number 3.
Cool.
That's fascinating. Yeah. I want to, and I'm sorry that the Brits keep moving into wine areas. They do, don't they? I've noticed that a lot. Wherever there's booze, the Brits go, oh, I wouldn't mind living here. Bordeaux, yeah, that's or champagne. I don't know.
You guys are like the bees, you're the pollinators. So.
We're just spreading it around. We're letting everybody know that it tastes good. We're like the tasters, really, from Tudor times when the king used to say, taste my wine. That's what we do for the rest of the world now.
Perfect.
I'd like to know.
Bode well for them back then.
I'd like to know what made you laugh this week.
What made me laugh this week? I've laughed a lot this week. So, well, I have two teenage boys, so a lot makes me laugh. About. I hate to say this, but about their relationships and about like their ideas of I've always said that the worst thing that could ever happen to you is just the worst thing that's ever happened to you, right? And so, sometimes when things come up that are such a big deal, I try to get them to laugh with me at what it might be instead of what it is.
That's good. When you're a teenager, everything is the worst.
Oh, it's the worst thing that's ever happened because it's the worst thing that ever happened to you. And so there's no way around it. It is the worst thing that's happened to them. Thank God. And I don't wish anything worse.
Yeah. And I want to know, what is your favorite snack, and does it always pair with a glass of wine?
Favorites. Okay, so my favorite wine connection in the world is being in Venice, specifically because there's a culture there called cicchetti, and cicchetti in Venice are just small little bites, and they're things that you get if you order a glass of wine. Then you get 2 to 3 little cicchetti, and they're not always crostini or bruschetta, but typically they are. But they might be, depending on the wine that you get, anything from like anchovies over sun-dried tomato on a crostini to some sort of prosciutto, with a fresh regional cheese, that sort of thing. But that's what I love is like having tiny little tastes that go perfectly with the wine that you have. And so, yeah, my favorite snack is cicchetti from northern Italy and Venice in particular. And it always goes with a glass of wine.
Love that. And I can see how you're good at selling wine, because I'm like, that sounds great. I'll try that. Whatever he recommends sounds amazing.
Yeah. So look it up. It's spelled really strangely. It's Cicchetti, cicchetti, and
I love that we're both writing that down.
Yeah,
we're both suddenly just
the word has good mouthfeel, so eating it must be even better.
I might have some cicchetti for lunch. I might go to Venice.
For sure.
I want to know, Steve, what would you do if tomorrow you won the lottery, the big one?
Oh, wow. I think if I won the lottery, the big one, I would take advantage of one of those situations, that's either in like there's some stuff in Sicily. There's some stuff in Spain. There's some stuff in Portugal where you can buy a villa for like $1 as long as you put some money into it and bring it up to its glory. I think that if I had that much money, I would do the most frugal thing I could, but have the money to do it. And my boys, both of them speak Italian, and I would probably figure out a situation for them to experience life abroad.
Oh, I love that.
Love that.
I love that you win the lottery, but you just get one of those dollar houses. I've been looking at those. When I was looking it up, apparently it's luck of the draw as well. You could arrive and you could have like a splendid place, or you could go, oh, it's just
this is crap. Yeah,
this is crap. But it only cost me $1.
No matter what, it's going to cost you, $200,000 or $300,000 to bring back.
To do it up. Yeah. That's. I've been looking into, because there's whole villages in Italy, aren't there? They're basically saying, please bring a whole community. Everybody spend $1 in a house, and we'll give you what you turn up, and they give you the keys, and they go, oh, is that my house? Okay.
It's the new wine town. You can be one in.
Yeah, we all want in.
Well, if I win the lottery, you guys are invited, okay?
Thank you, Steve. Thank you.
Thank you. And this has been so amazing. Thank you so much for doing this. I learned a lot, and I feel like I may need to go and have a glass of an alcoholic beverage.
Yeah, I think we should. Stephen, thank you so much.
Oh, you two have been a pleasure. And if you don't mind, I'm just going to say, please go to Vega Vineyard and Farm.com and look at what we're doing. And I invite everyone who's listening to please come and see us.
I've got to say, I've been there. It's a beautiful place to be. It's a beautiful place to eat, drink, and be merry. I'm a big fan, Steve. You've done a great job. I've not been
yet, but I want to. As you were describing it, I was thinking in my head, how far of a drive is that?
Please come, Casey. Cheers, you guys. Okay. Thank you so much.
Quick shout out to Mike Nicholas for being our tech savior, and Carmen Sclafani, also known as Wiser Time. Thanks for our music. And thank you all for listening.